We've been learning about the sugya of Baal Tosif for a few weeks now. The sugya of Baal Tosif is wide and broad and finds its way throughout much of Shas. We're holding into the Gemara itself. The last thing that we saw was actually we went down to we were holding already on Lamed Vav Amud Bet. We saw the Mishnah and we learned the Gemara. We actually learned through to Lamed Zayin Amud Bet. If someone asks you where you're holding in the Gemara, we're Lamed Zayin Amud Bet at the Mishnah. We stopped there and, for all intents and purposes, dropped anchor to focus ourselves on the question of Baal Tosif. What does it mean to add to a mitzvah? We know that in two places in the Torah and Sefer Dvarim, it's prohibited. I don't want to rehash the whole sugya, but that was the basis. And what we delved into is we saw Tosfot. We went back to compare and now link up the sugya on 36b and 37a back with the sugya on 31a, 31b, and we saw how they were connected. We learned together a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Peichet. Neither here nor there now is about Zakin Mamre. And in the packet that I gave out, which I'll put back on the screen, the early pages of it were the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Can't even see it on the screen there. I don't know how this works. Here, the Gemara in Sanhedrin. And then there was 2 pages that were pages about the Rambam. Yes, we had the Rambam in Perek Zion, 2 pages. Rambam, there was like a purple tab on it. And then the page following it, it was the part where the Rambam had told us that if you add to the 4 species, even from the 4 species, you would be over somehow on Baal Tosif. And then the Rambam said, very curiously, if you add Hadasim, as many as you like. In the same sentence that he said, if you want to do 2 lulavim, that's Baal Tosif. You want to add a 2 or 3 etrogim, Baal Tosif. As many Hadasim as you like is totally fine. And that was curious to us, and in fact, curious to many. And we found that in the Ravid was trying to understand where the Rambam might be coming from. He was challenging the Rambam based on the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Remember that the basic contours of the argument are Rabbi Yehuda maintains that it is a necessity, it is an essential ingredient of the Daled Minim that 3 of them be bundled together, and that they be bundled together specifically with material that is made from a date palm, i.e., it's lulav material. The strip, they took it down. He allowed that the bark would work, etc. If your phone's not muted, if you just mute your phone, you're welcome to unmute if you want to talk. But I'm hearing a lot of distortion on the line. And the Rabbanan, unlike Rabbi Yehuda, said, well, it's a mitzvah. In this case, approximating what sometimes people say erroneously, a mitzvah means a good deed. Well, it is a good deed in the sense that Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded it, right? But people all say, oh, it's a mitzvah for you to, fill in the blank. It's like it was a mitzvah, but they sort of conflate the two. But they did mean here, it's a mitzvah, not a mitzvah chiyuvit, not an essential obligatory mitzvah to bind the lulav, but they did think it was a mitzvah kiyumit. What mitzvah was that? The mitzvah of Hidur mitzvah, which is itself a mitzvah. From Shirat Hayam, we learned halachic information and data from it. Now, with that background, we delved into the work of the Rishimot Shiurei Hagrid, the notes on the Shiurim of Rav Soloveitchik on Masechet Sukka, written up by Rabbi Herschel Reichman. So in these Shalita, so in these pages, what we've been analyzing is how to understand the Rambam. We contrasted the Rambam, let's say, and Tosfot. We saw that for Tosfot, it's very much object-focused, and the Rav's Chiddush, which he took from his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, that was, for those who have it in front of them, that was on page, already the first page, on page Kuf Lamed Zayin. If you don't have it in front of you already there on the screen, don't worry. But in the bottom left-hand corner, B'tiretz Hagram, he was explaining that even if the lulav does not need an eged, which according to the Rabbanan, it does not need an eged, the issue of Baal Tosif is not Baal Tosif on an object, but Baal Tosif on a performance, i.e., at the moment of performance, you're holding too many objects, which destroys the integrity of the action that you're doing. Whereas Tosfot were very focused, let's say, on 2 types of psul. There was a psul of a chefza, and there was the psul of the what did he call it? The osaf of the chefza, the mitzvah, was a chalot din of a psul, and then there was yet another idea that that was an issue with the maseh, of the mitzvah, and that was a masa of Baal Tosif. And the Rav showed it was based on his father's idea that actually, and I'm skipping a lot because we spent a lot of time on this, the Rambam and Rabbeinu Hananel, we looked at Gemara and Sanhedrin, that essentially it's not an issue of the cheftza of the bundle. That's the problem. If you add different species, it's a problem of the action. The action is destroyed. So we learned something new about Baal Tosif, that some really focus it very much exclusively on objects, while others, like the Rambam, focus it on not just objects, but on actions. And we delved into this. We did this for pages, and we're not going to have time to see all the pages now again that we did. And it's okay, if you weren't here, you missed the part, you could always go back and try to read it to understand it. That's the basic gist, but of course there are many other twists and turns. What I want to pick up tonight is on page Kuf Lamed Tet. The top left-hand corner says Kuf Lamed Tet. And to pick up with something that I mentioned, it's very rare that I'm going to connect what's going on in the daily Dvar Halacha between Mincha and Mariv and something in the Shir. But today it happens to dovetail a little bit. I'm on Ot Gimel. Tonight, what I hope to accomplish, just so you know, in the next half hour, 40 minutes, is two things. Number one, to parse this question of the Ritva, and we will see the question of the Ritva now as regards something about Tefillah and a question of Baal Tosif. Number two, to try to get a little more grounding in, actually not grounding in, but to answer the question. So why did the Rambam say, oh, I'm very particular, you cannot have two lulavim? Oh, but Hadasim, many as you want. Why did that happen? So the Rav explains that as well. And we'll come to it now as we go. So again, I'm on page Kuf Lamed Tet. And what we're learning now presupposes that you have some inkling of the Gemara and the Gemaras, plural, that we learned. But here's how we go. Okay. And I apologize. I'll say it in advance. Speaking for those who were here and heard it all, I can't go back to the beginning and say the whole thing again and again. So if you say something that we already talked about, say, Ayin Sham, 3 shiurim ago, 5 shiurim ago, 8 shiurim ago, whatever it is. So the Ritva asks the following question here in this kind of sugya. The Ritva here asks the following. V'divar Ritva kanche mevi kushia. He asked the following question. Eich mitpaling tfilat nedava. V'lama ein iser Baal Tosif. A person is entitled, apparently, to pray an extra amida. It's a nedava, like you would give a korban nedava, you could give an extra shmona esrei. It's rare that a person would do this. There are rules to it. The main rule is you have to mechadesh something in the amida. You have to insert your own words somewhere in the amida. You have to know where and how. But absent that, you could not just stam yadavan shachos again, daven shachos again. But there is a provision for a tefillat nedava. So the Ritva asked, well, why isn't that Baal Tosif? You daven shmona esrei, you can daven shmona esrei again. Okay, you added a few words. It's another shmona esrei. And he asked as follows, but the Rav right away said this question is questionable itself. It's a puzzling question, because it says the Rav, Demashayach Baal Tosif, Ksheyesh Kiyum Mitzvah B'Hosafto. Where do you get the idea that there's some kind of Baal Tosif if you add to the Kiyum of the mitzvah? Previous examples that we saw were, for instance, Torah says you have to eat matzah. So you have to eat how much matzah? Kazayit of matzah. So what if you eat more than a kazayit of matzah? So you're over in Baal Tosif? No, so we saw, no, you're not over in Baal Tosif for various reasons. One, because it may be that's the floor amount you have to eat, but it's not the ceiling amount. Number two, the Vilna Gaon holds it's a mitzvah to eat matzah all 7 days. Number three, the Torah doesn't say how much you have to eat. It just says you have to eat matzah. We have halacha Moshe Sinai that an achila halachically equals a kazayit, but that's not a delimiting factor. Again, a minimum threshold. So you want to add more to it? The Rav says it's like someone who says, I have 2 lulavs next to each other. One is the regulation 4 tefachim. Another one is 6 tefachim. The guy who has a 6 tefach long lulav is over in Baal Tosif? Of course not. It's a larger shear of the kiyum of the chefza shel mitzvah. So you want to eat more matzah? You eat more matzah. Yeah. But the question here is, well, that's a strange question the Ritva is asking. How could you do tefillah nedava? Isn't it nedava, tefillah nedava, Baal Tosif? The Rav says, that's very strange. What are you talking about Baal Tosif? You're adding to the shear. Mitzvah, it says so in the Gemara. In fact, the Gemara in Brachot says, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halavai sheet pala adam kol yom kulo. U'cheish mitzvah enu shayach Baal Tosif But Tzarech in Gadol, we have to really understand what is the Ritva saying. It doesn't seem to compute. The Gemara itself says you could do a tefillah nedava. The Gemara itself says halavai person should daven all day. So what are you complaining? A guy wants to daven tefillah nedava. He says, well, maybe it's Baal Tosif. So the Rav explained as follows. Next paragraph, bottom paragraph, page Kuf Lametet. Va'ayin barif b'zel shono. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel haya omed b'tefillah v'nizka shekvar yitpalel posek afilu be'emtza bracha. You're in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei. I'm man enough to admit it's happened to me. Davening mincha, I come into shul. Davening mincha and realize I went to early mincha today. I already did this. You have to stop right there. It's happened to everybody, right? Yeah, I've been there, done that. So the worst is when you already finished davening and then you realize I did this right. But if you're in the middle and you realize, you have to stop immediately. You cannot finish. Mefarshe leRabbanan kigon sheitpal tfilato adaita techova v'shachach shekvar yitpalel v'amad yitpalel adaita techova v'nizke shekvar yitpalel posek v'afilu be'emtza bracha. If you're in the middle of the bracha even, and you said you already prayed the first time, you daven mincha is the most obvious one where it's going to happen, right? Because shachas involves equipment usually, and Marav it's like it's nighttime. Maybe it could happen at nighttime, but most likely mincha. You davened. You thought it was the chova of motzi. I'm yotzei now in the mitzvah of mincha. I'm davening mincha, the tefillah of mincha, my chova. Then I come later on, I daven mincha again as a chova. You cannot do it. You have to stop right there. Afilu be'emtza bracha. She'im bala gomra. Nimtzik mishamakriv shnei tamidin b'shachrit shu over mishum Baal Tosif. It would be akin to the community giving the korban tamid, which the tefillah is as against the korbanot. So says the Gemara in Baruch and Chavav, and you want to do it a second time. That you cannot do. Now on the altar, they were people who offered a korban nedava. You could do that. That's allowed. A korban nedava, olat nedava. Not too long ago we had it in Beitza. No.
Doing the whole Shemona Esrei again would be akin to.
No. So if you did a whole Shemona Esrei again, and you but you had in mind when you started, I already prayed, but now I'm doing a tefillah nedava for some reason.
I'm just shot here.
The pshat here is you davened already mincha in a minyan, or you davened by yourself, but you said, I'm davening mincha now. Pardon?
Once you realize.
Yeah, and the second you have to stop in the middle of the bracha. Don't even finish. Otherwise, it's Baal Tosif. Exactly. And he says, the Rif says, that's like offering two korbanot tamid. Here's the example of Shachar. Even Rabbi Yochanan says, halavai, a person should daven all day. Even there, Rabbi Yochanan would agree. To look on Rabbi Yochanan, ulavai sheitpala adam kol yom kulo, ela tfilat nedava. When Rabbi Yochanan made that statement, which is, by the way, of course, sort of a bit of an exaggerated statement. Halavai, you can daven all day, but parnasa, eating, interacting with human beings or whatever it is, but halavai, a person should daven all day, right? So Rabbi Yochanan just meant tefillah nedava. He didn't mean the korban. He didn't mean the tefillah of chova. You could keep saying over and over again. Because when aval tefillah chova loka amar, that he never had in mind. Ad kan lasono. That's the Rif says. Says the Rabbi Soloveitchik. Second to last line. But tzarich Ian, have to understand this. Deha chazar ala mitzvah muteret. But I thought you're allowed to repeat a mitzvah. Sheharei litol dalad minim pa'amayim biyom. You want to take the dalad minim on the top now of the left-hand column. Litko b'shofar pa'amayim. You want to blow the shofar several times. By the by, that's what we do. Ages ago, we learned the Tosfot on in Rosh Hashanah, Chav Chet, I think, Amud Bet, where he says, how do you blow shofar 100 times? The Torah says how many times you can blow shofar. You're blowing extra? No, you're allowed. That's not Baal Tosif. You're just repeating the mitzvah that you're doing more of it. So the Rav says, so how come when it came to this, it's so different? V'lama oser harif shtei tefilot chova u'shnei korbanot tamid me'isr Baal Tosif. Where do you get from that? So says the Rav, second paragraph now, Kuf Lametet. V'nira shetfila shniya eino chazara ala tefila rishona. D'chol chefze v'chefze shel tefila lichudahi v'eina ota tefila shitpel barishona. It seems that when it comes to prayer, these are discrete, standalone actions. It's not adding to the mitzvah you did before. It's a separate offering. Remember that's the analogy. It's to offerings. So when you daven already tefillat chova, that was as against the tamid shel shachar or tamid ben arbaim, whatever it is. Now when you did it again, showing you're doing the chova again, you cannot do that again. If you said before it's nedava, that'd be fine. But the Rav is pointing out here, it's not the same thing as I picked up the lulav, I put it down. Now I pick up my lulav and I'm waving it, and I pick up my lulav and I'm holding it for Leilul Shabbat. That's not the same thing. I did the mitzvah. Now I'm just carrying it out longer. V'chein b'korban, says the Rav. Mikeven shemevi b'heim ashniya have a cheftza havya cheftza Shel korban miyuchad la'atzmo ve'eno chazar la'krav rishona. If you gave a korban tamid, then you give another korban tamid, you're not giving extra korban tamid, you're giving another korban tamid. It's
So since we're talking about sukkahs,
object. What?
since we're talking about sukkahs, can you do on a regular, not Hoshana Rabbah, can you do two Hoshana circles around the bima?
The minig is one. That's what it describes. And we're coming to it yet, Masachet Sukkah, but I don't think that's about Tosif.
Okay.
Right? It's not. You're just holding on to it as long as you want. It's not.
Yeah, on Simchat Torah, we make several
Yeah, but it says Simchas Torah. Don't forget, it's patterned off many different things. One of them was Hoshana Rabbah, 7 and 7.
Right.
Yeah, but now with the Torah instead of whatever. But Mashe'en Kain, Benoto Dalam Minim Pa'amayim, Otokei Shofar Pa'amayim B'Yom, Chozer Mamash Ala Mitzvah Rishona V'Chazara Mutaret. You can go back again.
with a bracha.
No, you wouldn't make a bracha. You did. You only make the bracha once. Mida agbe afke nafke. When you picked it up, you were yotze the mitzvah. So you can make the bracha one time. It's not about making the bracha again. It's about repeating the mitzvah. So you make a bracha matzah. Eat as much matzah as you want. It's not limited.
What about Kia, who does it many times in different
So the only way they could do it many times is if there's a din of yatzamotzi. That you be motzi someone else, and if they weren't yotzi at the mitzvah, you can be motzi them. Not for now, but a separate discussion. What if that person's not truly chayiv? When push comes to shove, they're not chayiv in shofar. Like women are not chayiv in shofar. Now, for many generations of Rishonim are already writing, the women are makpid. They're going to hear shofar. It's a mitzvah kiyum. They get a kiyum in it. And who doesn't, feel a sense of awe? And that's what Rosh Hashanah is. But if push came to shove, they're not obligated. So there's a question there about if someone could be yatzamotzi, because if someone's not obligated in the mitzvah as a mitzvah chiyuvit, can someone else who is obligated but who discharged their obligation recite the bracha? But I'll give you the best example, because as you're bringing it up about brachas, what about dalet kosot? And that's the next paragraph. V'hinei b'din de'ein mosifin al dalet kosot b'leil haseder. Right? Remember, you make 4 brachas. Not everybody says you make 4 brachas, but practically Ashkenazim make 4 brachas. Sfaradim do not. They make 1 and 3. They don't make 2 and 4. We do 4. So v'hinei b'din de'ein mosifin al dalet kosot b'leil haseder. So ita sham barashbam b'shem Yerushalmi da'atam hu mishum shema yishtaker. If you do more than 4 cups, you may get drunk and you can't finish the seder, and that's not good. Varashbam ba'atzmo, but himself, he called that from the Yerushalmi, but the Rashbam himself says mefarish mushenira kemosif mikol makom iser baltos mamash einenu. It's not actually baltosif, but it looks like you're copying. But tzarich ino liba daharif lama eno baltosif. But what the Rif told us is when you have discrete actions and each one would have significance on its own, and what greater, as Larry pointed out, asking about the bracha, what greater significance? You're making a bracha on each kos. You're showing this is so important to me, right? It's like it's a standalone. That's why there's daled kosot. Yeah. By the by, if you just drank 4 kosot, you were in a rush, or you're in a tank, God forbid, or in a hospital. You can't just chug 4 kosot and say you did it. Yeah. It's not just about drinking 4 cups. But the point is that it's al haseder, and that you get away with the first one, right? And there's all sorts of machloksim. Can you add cups in the middle? So here you have Dein Mosif. So the Rav writes the following: V'nirali the Din Bal Tosif Shayach Rak b'makom sheish tzeiruf bein ha'usafa ubein lamitzvah. There has to be a combination, a synthesis, a linkage between the additive element of the mitzvah, the repeat of the mitzvah, and the original mitzvah. Kimo b'mitfal shtei tefilot, v'hashtei and tefillah, because each time you pray, you're praying. That's what you're doing. V'gam maybe shnei tzmidim, the hashneim korban, they're both offerings. The yesh tzeiruf, there's a connection and a linkage, a combination between bein hamitzvah, the hosafa, the domi mahadada, they're the same thing. The usr, and they're forbidden. She'enim chazara echad l'sheni. It's not repeating it; it's another one. You follow the difference? I'm adding to the amount of matzah I'm eating, or I'm adding to the amount of time I'm holding on to my lulav and etrog, or I'm adding the number of kolot I want to sound to be machtir, Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the same thing as I gave a korban, I gave another korban, and I'm calling each of them the same obligatory korban. God said, bring me 1 korban in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. You decide in the morning, I want to give 3. That's Baal Tosif. But there needs to be a linkage between the two. in order to be an issue. Hosafa, ala dalad kosot tzarich liot kos shel bracha. The additional cups need to be called a kos shel bracha. The chefza shel dalad kosot have a chefza de kos shel bracha. The object of each of the dalad kosot is a chefza of a kos shel bracha. The object is a cup of bracha. If you're adding cups, but these are not kosot shel bracha, they're stam kosot, because you like to drink wine. I mean, what are they drinking in the olden days? You got your water, your wine, and your ale. That's about it. So there's not fruit juice, there's no cola, right? We don't think of it this way. But so at the dinner table in your Shulchan Aruch, you want to drink extra wine. Oh, Baal Tosif, you only allowed 4. No, because that's not a kos shel bracha. I didn't make a separate Bar Pri Hagafen on that. I'm drinking it in the context of my meal. It doesn't have the same status. So ein seruf bein hosaf mitzvah. Right, so I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the right before that letter Daled. So he points to there's no linkage between the hosafa and the mitzvah. There's not going to be Baal Tosif in that case. The ein kan hosafa klal she'ein shayachut beineim uvein hakos shemosif lishtot. There isn't, the Rav says, he thinks, a connection between these two. He thinks that if you're drinking a kos, as you normally would, you're not making a separate Bar Pri Hagafen, you're not showing it's a kos shel bracha, it's stam kos. Once you make a bracha Bar Pri Hagafen, you can drink whatever you want. Yeah, it's the hamotzi of beverages. Now you see the 21 little footnote there. If you scroll your eye down to the bottom, the Rav allows, or maybe this was Rabbi Reichman, I don't know, that his uncle, the Grizz, Rav Yitzchak Zev, Halevi Soloveitchik, did not agree, would not have agreed with this idea. Lichora zeh shelo kemar and Hagriz Halevi Zatzal, Besifra al Rambam, his book on the Rambam, Shekotev, Sheyesh mitzvah lishtot, Daled kosot yain belel seder, va'af al pisha enam kosot shel bracha. Your mitzvah is to drink 4 cups of wine, and that is seder, even if they're not kosot shel bracha. So the kashel shitato, lama ein Baal Tosif min haTorah, shemosif lishtot yain yoter midal kosot shel seder, v'tzarich iyon. According to that logic, you can drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder, and otherwise you can drink ale, you can drink water, obviously you can't drink milk. Well, you can't drink ale. I take that back. Right. Sorry. You could drink, what's no, they don't have seltzer in the olden days. What's it? Slivovitz. Slivovitz. They're bringing around the Slivovitz. Get the Slivovitz. Arak. They didn't have that either, no. Questions, comments, before we go to the next section.
Rabbi?
1 second, I got a question here from, 1 second, Larry, in person, and then I'm coming to you next. Yeah.
Okay.
The person drank 4 cups of wine, not in the middle of the Suda, but didn't make a bracha, a separate bracha on them.
Yeah. They drank extra cups, not 4 cups, 3 cups, 2 cups, 8 cups, doesn't matter. They drank extra cups. The Rav's just pointing out, why isn't that Baal Tosif? You didn't make a bracha.
What I thought I understood is before that extra cups, they were 4 and no more than 4 cups.
That's the question. The question is, if we're saying that you're not allowed to add to a mitzvah when it's separate units, but you are allowed to add to a mitzvah when it's just expanding the quantity of the repetition of the same action, again, the Rav says, why are you, according to most, not according to his uncle, but according to most, you're allowed to have more than 4 cups at your Seder. When you're eating the meal, you're thirsty, you pour yourself a drink. Could be a drink of wine. Well, wait a minute. I thought you're only supposed to drink 4 cups. Isn't it Baal Tosif to drink more? It's only Baal Tosif if you were to make another Bar Pri Hagafen and create another kos shel bracha.
So I would think, based on if my understanding is correct, someone makes kiddush, Bar Pri Hagafen, which is kolel normally, all the wine you're going to drink. in the
Yeah.
meal. And he comes to the second kos and the third kos.
In a Seder in general?
In the Seder.
Oh, yeah.
And he comes to the second kos and the third kos and the fourth kos. And he benevolently says, I already made Bar Pri Hagafen.
I don't want to do it again.
I don't need to do it again. I'm a tzaddik.
So according to the Mechaber, according to the Shulchan Aruch, if he did that for the second kos, that would be fine. That is the psak actually of Maran. That is what Sfaradim don't do. They do not make a bracha on kos number 2. And then they bench. And then since they finish Birkat Hamazon, that's the closing of the Bar Pri Hagafen. So they make another Bar Pri Hagafen for kos number 3. And then for kos number 4, they don't make another bracha. Another shiur for another time, not for now. There's the whole debate and discussion among some of the arch Zionists, let's say, about the kos chamishi, whether you're supposed to drink the fifth cup. I do not drink the fifth cup. Mashiach Tzidkenu will arrive to drink the fifth cup, but I have it on my table. But there are people like Mamash Tziyonim, and there is a halacha case to be made that you should drink the fifth cup. Wait a minute. Should you make hakafen on that fifth cup? According to the Rav, who would not say you drink the fifth cup, but assuming you were to drink if you make a bracha on that and you're wrong, you're over on Baal Tosif. So you don't want to be wrong on that. The stakes are pretty high. But if you're just, I'm going to drink an extra cup, if you didn't say, I'll get up to the fourth cup, and you drank a fifth cup. Now, we generally maintain you're not supposed to drink or eat anything after you finish the fourth cup. Yeah. So that's the minhag. But I'm just theoretically, like, is that Baal Tosif? If you made another bracha, yeah, it for sure is. But according to the Ashkenazic tradition, you need to say the Borei Pri Hagafen 4 times to create 4 separate kosot shel bracha. The Rav here very deftly quoted from the Rambam, who's also Ashkenazi. So he saved himself. Yeah. Well, Ronnie's waiting. Ronnie, sorry, did you fall asleep while I was took so long?
I'm
Oh, you're
here.
right there. Hi, go ahead.
I'm here.
And Ira has his hand up. I didn't even notice. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay, a different mitzvah. Obviously, this only applies to mitzvah saseh. Mitzvah in the Torah of pa'as sadcha. You leave
Yeah.
it for the poor. Does it have to be just the corner, or can you leave the entire field? Would that be Baal Tosif?
I do not think it would be Baal Tosif. I think it's an expansion on the shear. Now, whether you're actually allowed to leave the whole field or if that's no longer the payah of the sadeh, I'm not holding enough in Hilchos Payah to answer you, so I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
Oh, wait, Benny?
I remember correctly in Masechet
Yeah.
you say you do have to leave some portion of the feed for yourself.
Did you hear that?
You have to leave a piece for yourself.
Right.
Is that what you said? Okay.
I'd go give him a hug and a kiss right now, but I'll break all the COVID rules. But there you have it.
Very good.
Shalmi Paya. You have to keep something for yourself. That was my hunch. The halachic intuition. I don't know. It was a guess on my part, but Benny's quoting it. That's it.
Yeah, we learned it in MTA many years. No, we didn't.
Oh, maybe you did. I don't know. But
No, we
Benny
didn't.
just quoted
Trust
it.
me.
Yeah. But
We didn't know it.
that's it. So
Excellent.
But if you expand this year, I think you're allowed to expand this year. I think. Yeah, I'm getting a nod.
There's a standard amount, like, just like the Truma.
Yeah. Okay. There's a standard amount, but it's not the ceiling. And yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Ira, your hand is up. I'm not sure if. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that from what I remember learning, I think it's maybe in the Mishnah Brura that on Pesach night that it would be inappropriate to drink during your seder more wine than the arba kosod. You know, so if you want to have a glass of wine with your meal, that would be inappropriate because you have the arba kosod, so it takes away from the arba kosod.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what I learned.
with the Rashbam quoted from Yerushalmi, we're worried you can get drunk. So that's a real concern. But the other opinion, his own opinion, that if you're adding, then it seems like you're being mosif. That's only a chash if you're making another bracha on it. Otherwise, it doesn't. You understand? But you're right.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, just to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left or so. There is an excursus, which is amazing. We won't get there. An Ot Daled about Birkat Kohanim. And what happens if the Kohen decides, I really love giving brachas, let me throw in an extra line. So there's that Baal Tosif. The short answer is, yeah, you cannot do that. You cannot.
Mentioned in someone mentioned that in the
Yeah, right, exactly. So Mark's been doing some background fact checking. He found in the Rashi quotes from the Sifri on Vayet Hanan or Vayet Hanan, who mentions among the other examples of a bunch of examples of what Baal Tosif is.
They're on bond on that one.
Right, exactly. Exactly. They focus on Birkat Kohanim. There's a lot here. We can either do that or we could talk about why the Rambam went off
Can I just add,
with the Hadasim. Yeah.
when we say something is or isn't Baal Tosif, don't we have to put it into the category, is it the Masa Mitzvah or is it the Chetz? So for
Right.
example,
Right.
when you say, let's go back to the Arba Koso, right? Clearly drinking a gallon of wine for each cup is fine, right? The mitzvah
Yeah.
is to drink at least.
Yeah, right,
right?
right.
So you're not Baal Tosif on the actual thing.
Right.
Because you're not making a bracha, you can't be Baal Tosif on Masa Mitzvah because you're not doing it as a mitzvah again.
Yeah.
Right? if you said, I'm gonna drink half the glass and make another bracha, and then
That would be a problem.
that would be a problem.
Right.
For a bunch of reasons. So when we say, okay, adding a 6th or 7th cup, or a 5th or 6th cup, that would also, depending on how you're defining Baltosi, that may or may not work, right? If just drinking because you're thirsty and, you know, they don't have Diet Pepsi around.
Yeah, but as long as you don't make a bracha, we're basically saying it's not Baltosi.
Right, because you haven't done Masa Mitzvah, and you just added to the, because.
You added to the matzah you did before.
The mitzvah isn't at least mitzvah, right? We have mitzvah that say, do at least this, we have mitzvah that do
Up to.
exactly this.
Yeah, right.
We have mitzvah that are on the, mitzvah that are on the.
Fine.
Right, so this is in the at least category, so.
Yes.
I think when I went through this, I was trying to think about each, as they define it, we have to say, why is it qualified and disqualified? So it's, because he's not saying this in the article.
Well, he is. The Rav is focused on the idea that for the Rambam, the whole notion of the concept of Baal Tosif is not about objects exclusively, but it's also about actions.
But before you take it on, don't you have to define what the mitzvah actually is, whether it's an at least or defined number one, a numerical one,
Fine.
and then figure out whether you're going to be oved on a ketzah or on a matzah mitzvah.
On a chavtza or a matzah mitzvah.
Just go back to lulav.
Right.
Right?
Right.
We all agree if you had 27 things in your rebbe,
You'd be gone.
Be
Yeah,
gone,
finished.
right?
Yeah.
because the Torah says take 4 species.
Right.
Say take 20.
Right.
We learned that that's the Maisa.
According to the Rambam, though, the issue there, because in the Parsons like the Rabbanan, that there isn't a need for an egg yet. According to Yehuda is another thing.
So,
According to the Rabbanan, right, you're holding 27 things in your hand. So when you shake it, you're not yotze the mitzvah of lulav, because the masa mitzvah, at the moment you did it, you're holding too many things. But not because there's an object.
right.
Actually, these are discrete objects that happen to be in your hand at the same time. In fact, I'll go one further. We saw this previously. I'm kind of backtracking. The Rav says that according to the Rambam, a person who would make a bracha with 27 things in their hand would not be yotze the mitzvah of lulav and would be over in Baal Tosif. But if they kept that bundle in their hand and they did the not knew him, they would actually be yotze in the not knew him. Because it's not about the objects, but the action of the moving around of these 4
That's what
things.
I'm saying, you have to define it.
Yeah.
If we go forward now, if we could just try to define it into one of those 2 categories as he's defining it,
Right.
that would help me.
I don't think we have time left in the 7 minutes left to do that, but you're right. Each of these things, that's what he's focused on. In fact, this Ot Daled, which we're not going to do, but I keep talking around, is about the difference between, what part of the mitzvah that you're doing is the masa mitzvah, and what is the chefza of the mitzvah, even if the chefza is not something tangible.
Right.
The chefza means the word object, but subject object doesn't mean the object is inanimate per se. The person can also be an object, and sometimes the words they speak are creating an object, whatever. But
It had the silo.
yeah, so that is what you're trying to do, is plug in as an at least mitzvahs that are limited. And by the by, here's a good place where the rubber meets the road. We have 1 lulav, 1 etrog, 2 aravot, an unlimited number of hadasim. So why for the other minim did the Rambam say, not only do I not let you take daffodils, but if you take an extra lulav, you're out of there. You destroyed the masa mitzvah. Why? I have the 4th species. I have extra of the 4th species. Oh, but when it comes to Hadasim, there I give you permission. Why did that disconnect happen? So if you look on page Kuf Mem Aleph, we'll have to skip there because I don't know how else to do this in the allotted time, but that's life. And I'm pushing it a little bit, by the way, because I feel like we spent many weeks on this subject and I want to pick up stakes and actually go back to the daf and learn more Gemara. So I'm on page Kuf Mem Aleph 141 on the top left-hand corner. And I'm just because it gets down to business, it's right before the hine, but if you have here after vihine, that toward the bottom of that paragraph, it says adkan lashono on the margin is the first word on the right-hand side, and then it says vitzarach ion. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph that started vihine. v'tzarech iyun lama matiro safa ba'adasim bilvad lo b'shar haminim. We have to understand that. Now he explained the whole thing. I'm skipping, but you'll have to fill that in. But v'nira shetochik lomar shenoi mitzvah bilvad matira iser the Baal Tosif. It seems strange that it's for noi mitzvah. The came lama leka noi mitzvah gam b'shar haminim. If it's about beautification, so allow me to have as many trogim as I want. Ulefiza maishna Rambam should davka ba'adasim mutar lahosif. So v'lich ora, next paragraph. Now he explains it. V'lich ora, biur advarim hu deshoneh din haminyan deshlosh hadasim haminyan sheshar haminim. The number of hadasim described in the Torah is different than the number of other species mentioned in the Torah. Kimo haminyan shel shtei aravot. Like the number that is specified with regard to the aravot. He explains. Minyan shlosha hadasim eino minyan la'atzmo. The number 3 for hadasim is not a number in and of itself. El mehaveh shir b'chavtza shel hadasim. It represents a measurement in the object of the hadasim. Why? A characteristic. Here's what he explains. The Torah kar al hadasim anaf eitz avot. Remember, it doesn't say hadasim in the Torah. It says anaf eitz avot. Anaf is a branch, eitz is a tree, and avot means braided. Hadasim avot means something thick or dense because it's braided, right? Tzrichim liot shlosha has to be 3. To pachat mishlosha ena avot. I know, by the way, someone's gonna jump me with a question, and I'm gonna say it's a good question. I'm not answering until we get to the paragraph. And you're gonna say, "Oh, Barsha Kivanti." So here we go. But I'll leave. I won't ask the question. I'll let you ask the question. But he says the hadasim, it never says in a quantity, just says have to be braided. And it doesn't say it even, in the plural, anaf eitz avot. The word avot is in the plural, but it's anaf eitz avot. So the Gemara has 3 is that number. Mikol makom. Ein bezechi of minyan misuyam. Like haradavka shlosha hadasim. El shepachat mishlosh hadasim, einam anaf eitz avot. If it's less than 3 twigs, 3 branches, it's not really going to be braided enough. You don't have an object of hadasim. Chazal set that it's 3 as the minimum. Yotzei shadin sheshlosh hadasim einodiin minyan b'maaseh hamitzvah. Mark Pershan, you're going to put your name in right over here. It's not a din in the number, the delimiting factor of the number. It's the minimum threshold so that you can say this is called braided. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Leave it to the rough, right? The pachot mishlosha, less than 3, eino avod. It's not dense, it's not thick, it's not braided. But ayin betosfot and lamedal bebet shekach maybe b'shem perish akuntras anaf chad eitz chad avot chad. Tosfot quotes from Rashi that he says anaf means 1, eitz means 1, and avot means 1. There's 3 words, so it's 3 twigs. The din hashlosha chalot b'chatzish lanaf eitz avot. V'lachein matir harabim lahosif al gimel hadasim. The ein din minyan be'atzem masa lakicha. The number here didn't matter, but think about it. She'ein alacha bichlal lakachet gimel hadasim be'atzem masa mitzvah. Ki adinu lakachet anaf eitz avot upachim gimel eno avot. And by the way, what does it say for lulav? Kapot tmarim, but it's spelled chaser without the vav. It's spelled kapat tmarim. The gemara, there's a drush, a gemura, that kapat tmarim means 1. Pre eitz hadar is 1. Arvei nachal is also plural, isn't it?
Right. So
I knew you were going to ask that question. So wait. Umishum hachi. To the next page. Kuf mem bet. Top right hand side. Umishum hachi. Afshar lakachet yotim gimel hadasim lanoi. Ki kol hadasim echshav biyach l'chavtza shel anaf eitz avot. They become one object of a chavtza called anaf eitz avot, a braided, thickly braided series of branches that are going. Mashe'en kin ba'aravot. Da Torah korah otan arvei nachal. Insert Benny's name over here. He just said it. V'sheyesh mispar shtayim be'atzem asa mitzvah. That the minimum number of plural is 2. It said plural, but the minimum number is 2. Da mitzvah hi dafka lakachat shtei aravot. Umikevan sheyesh chalot din minyan b'maseh hamitzvah yesh isu ba'al tosif ve'en lahosif aleihem. You can't add to aravot. Umavur mizeh she'avu b'shar haminim posik Rambam shenitan lakach lamzeh chazeh. This was what he was talking about before. Could you pick them up sequentially? So he says, with the other minim, you want to pick up your lulav, down. Etrog up, etrog down. Aravot up, down, or even 1-1. But when it comes to the hadasim, There he says, Why? Because the point is the net effect of three of them together. The you pick up 1, 2, 3 separate pickings up of the Hadasim, you don't have avot because they're not together. But this is what I want to show you because this could have been your question. How do you know that a ravot, that's the maximum is 2? Maybe it's also minimum threshold. It says plural. So the minimum plural is 2, but maybe there's no maximum. Good. That was what the Ritva thought. The Ritva, next paragraph, al sugikan, shemevi et hadin, v'hai l'chudekai, v'hai l'chudekai, v'hosafa al hadasim, v'al ha'aravot, v'inamavda beinehem. According to the Ritva, right? He says everything is standalone. He thinks you could have extra aravot too. In the Ritva, in Seville, in old Seville, that's what they were doing. He's Al Seville, he's from Seville. So in Spain. So there they took extra Hadasim and extra Aravot. There were plenty. Shalok Rambam, Shemati Rak Hadasim. Mashva the Sover Shlokichar Hadasim Shaveh Lishar Haminim. He thinks, the Ritva, that you could even pick up 1 Hadas, 2 Hadas, 3 Hadas, and he thinks you can pick up 1 Arava, 2 Arava, 5 Arava, 8 Arava, however many you want, because he doesn't think that it's any different than the other Minim. Lefi, Bahag, Lichor Yotze, Al Pi Lefi, Bahag, Lichor Yotze, Al Pi Ritva, Shekemo, Shemuter, Laka, no, it's not Bahag, excuse me. Ulafi bechi hai gavna. Sorry, according in that case, can't be the bahag. Bahag lived before. Lichor yotze al pi Ritva. Shekamo shemut lekach chomin umin lechud. According to the Ritva, at least came to lekach kol das v'das lechud. Zechazeh the sover the minion shlosh b'adasim adin hu b'matzah mitzvah. The mitzvah he lekach shlosh hadasim. You need 3 hadasim. Vein zeh din v'chatz danaf itzavot. And according to the Ritva, hadasim and ravot, pick up as much as you like.
So you can have
For the Ritva, we don't pass them that way.
3, 4.
No. The Torah says 1 etrog. Torah says 1 lulav. Drasha gemura, or overt in the pasuk. But arvei nachal is plural. Minimum of plural is 2, but it's not a maximum number. And hadasim is anaf 8 avot. It has to look avot. So does it look avot if there are 8 there or a dozen there? Yeah, as long as there were at least 3. That's the minimum number, not the maximum. For the Rambam. For the Ritva, there's something else a little bit strange that's there, which is that he thinks that Hadasim and Aravot, you can have as many as you want, and he doesn't seem to hold a Avot. He thinks you could just keep picking them up. In other words, for the Ritva would say it like this: the Torah told us that Pri Hadar is 1 etrog. The Torah told us kapat tamarim is 1 lulav, but then it used some idea that's plural of anaf 8 avot, that's a minimum number, and for hadasim, and for arvei nachal means in the plural, minimum 2, but you want to do more, you can do more. And he says, therefore, you could pick each one up. And the Ritva quotes his Rabbi, who was the Rabbi of the Ritva, among other people, the Rashba, the Koteva Ritva, right? This is the last thing we're going to see, because after that goes back to Birchat Kohanim, so I can't go back there. But the Koteva Ritva, Vizel Shono, Aval Mori, Natre Rachmana, Uparke means God should protect him and save him. Mifaresh, B'Shem Rabbeinu Hagadol. Rabbeinu Hagadol Zal is actually the name of the Ramban, so it goes back there. The Chol Heicha, the Amrin and Hailuchudei Kai, Hailuchudei Kai. Whenever we paskin, this is a standalone, that's a standalone. Leka Mishum Bal Tosif. There's no such thing as Bal Tosif. Masha Amr B'Kohen Sha'ol Ducha B'Hosif Echa Mishalosh Over Bal Tosif. Shiny Hatam Shitzorach Prisat Kapayim, excuse me, Avalachain, Shahakol Ose in Prisat Kapayim, Havalek Lulav, the Rabbi. Okay, I can't get there. It becomes an issue with, is there a chefza going on with the brachas? I don't want to touch it. But what we saw tonight was 2 things. Number 1, we tried to understand a little bit better. The Rav formulated a little bit better for us the difference between repeating something that has a minimum threshold that you can do extra times. That's not Baal Tosif, because you're just expanding the shear of it, whether of the object, eating more matzah, or the times you do it, like you keep holding on to the lulav all day long. The Akira Yerushalayim, the Gemara says we're going to get there. They held the lulav all day long. They go to lunch, they're holding the lulav in the etrog, and I don't know how they're eating, but they're holding it. They're walking in the street, holding it. Maybe they put it down for a minute or something. You want to blow shofar throughout the day? Blow shofar throughout the day. You have to blow, not for mitzvah. You finished. You're 30. Now you want to do 30 again? You want to fill it out to 100? No problem. Not Baal Tosif. You want to pick up extra Minim? Wait a second. Because that's right. You're adding extra items. That's destroying the Maisa HaMitzvah because you're adding materially to your action.
You're adding to something that's been defined.
Exactly.
That-
Better
that-
language.
that's
Thank you.
really-
Yes,
once
there's
it's
something that's been defined and delimited and delimited
Right.
and delimited. Anyway, much more to say. Kamuvan, isn't that always the case? But let me let everybody go because I have a meeting in 10 minutes that I must be on a Zoom for. Jeff, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering
Let's
from
do-
all this, why is no one ever referring to the
Jeff,
Mishnah,
why is what, no one what?
ever referring to the Mishnah back on Daf Lamed Dalad Amud Beit, where there's this whole debate about
The
how
number.
many Hadasim you need with the clip tops and all that?
Yeah, that's where we had 1, according to one opinion, right?
Yeah, or you
Yeah.
need 3, or you need 2,
Uh,
or one.
I guess you could extrapolate from this that according to those shitas, Baal Tosif would come in at different numbers. But Lamaisa, we're saying, I mean, it's not as fun to talk about one Hadass and one Arava.
Hmm.
And the point here is, okay, we have a number 3. So is that the minimum threshold or is that the delimiting factor? Like this is the defined amount. And I think that's why they don't engage those shitas per se. Anyway, that's all I have time for tonight. Thanks for joining. Next week,
Cool.
8:00 again next week because the time of Mincha is like 6:05 or 6 or something. And then we'll be switching a little while after that. But for now, 8:00 till we switch the time. Take care.